Hey everyone, welcome back. We all want to stay informed, but sometimes it feels like we're just getting bombarded with information, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Information overload is a real thing.
So today, we're going to do a deep dive into something that affects us all. The financial pressures that the middle class is facing these days. The big question we're asking is the middle class actually getting poorer?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. It's not always obvious from the surface.
Exactly. To help us really get to the bottom of this, we've got a mix of stuff to work with today.
That's right.
We have one person's very personal story,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of you might relate to.
Yes, definitely. Very relatable.
And we've also got some hard data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need both sides of the story to understand the situation fully. Combining the human experience with the numbers gives us the full picture.
Right. So our mission, as always, is to go through this and pull out the stuff that really matters
Mm-hmm.
so that you can understand how things are looking for the middle class right now without having to sift through everything yourselves. All
Exactly.
right, let's jump in.
Okay.
Let's start with that personal story we mentioned. So the person telling the story
Mm-hmm.
talks about growing up in a middle-class family,
Yeah.
and they had what sounds like a really small income by today's standards, between 2,000 and 4,000 rupees a month.
Wow.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Even with that income, they managed to do some pretty major things. Like, they eventually owned their own home.
Oh, wow.
They bought a car, their first brand new car, in 2015.
That's impressive.
And they put their kids through school. They even sent this person, the one telling the story, to the U.S. on a full scholarship.
Wow, that must have been a huge achievement.
Right. Especially back then, there were so many logistical and financial hurdles.
Absolutely.
Think about the visa costs, the plane tickets.
Oh, yeah. That's a lot to overcome.
And then this story gets even more interesting because this person talks about where they are now financially.
Hmm.
They say they earn way more,
Mm.
something between 40,000 and 70,000 rupees a month.
That's a considerable difference.
But they're finding it so much harder to achieve the same things their parents did. Owning a home feels like a distant dream. Buying a car without taking on debt seems impossible. And the costs of raising a family just keep going up.
Even things like streaming services add up, and with inflation,
Oh,
it,
yes.
it can feel like you're constantly running just to stay in place. It's not surprising that this story is resonating with so many people.
I know, right? You see yourself in it, or you see people you know.
Exactly.
It really makes you think, why is it so much harder now, even when people are earning more? It's like we're earning more, but somehow ending up with less.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that main question. Why is it so much harder for today's middle class to do what earlier generations did with so much less?
And that's where the data comes in. It helps explain what's going on.
Absolutely. The data provides that concrete evidence to support the gut feelings so many of us have.
One of the biggest things that jumped out was the difference between how much things cost and how much incomes grew between 2020 and 2025.
Right. Those 5 years were a turning point for many.
So get this. The cost of things went up by a whopping 32%. So something that cost 100 rupees back in 2020, now it costs 132 rupees.
Oof.
But here's the kicker. Incomes only went up by 15% during that same time.
Well,
So what was 100 rupees then is only 115 rupees now.
so your money just doesn't buy as much anymore. Your purchasing power has actually decreased.
Right. You could be earning more and still be worse off because things are so much more expensive.
Exactly.
And this really hits home when you look at big goals like buying a house.
Yeah, homeownership. It's a dream for so many, but it's getting harder.
The data shows that the time it takes to save up for a down payment has gone way up.
It's a scary trend.
In 2019, it would have taken about 14 years of your salary. But guess what? By 2025, it takes 18 years.
That's a huge jump.
That's 4 more years of saving.
It's a huge challenge for those hoping to own their own home, for sure. It might mean they need to completely rethink their approach to saving and financial planning.
Right. It's not just about those big things either. The data also shows a shift in how the middle class spends their money each month.
Yeah, the breakdown of expenses has definitely changed.
In 2025, people were spending about 74% of their income on essentials.
Essentials like food, housing, bills.
Exactly. But back in 2020, it was only 65%.
That means less and less is left over for savings, investments, or even just those little things that make life a bit nicer.
This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
The source we looked at talks about what's happening with fast-moving consumer goods companies.
Mm.
The companies that make everyday things like groceries and stuff.
Right, FMCG. I know what you mean.
So it says that their premium products are doing really well,
Oh, interesting.
but their affordable stuff is struggling. What do you think that says about different income groups?
That suggests a widening gap between those who can afford more and those who are being squeezed. Those with higher incomes seem comfortable spending on premium products.
Yeah,
But the struggle of the affordable segment suggests that a lot of people, probably many in the middle class, are becoming more sensitive to
right.
prices.
They're having to be more careful about what they buy.
And it all ties back to that point about spending more on essentials. There's less money left over for anything else.
It's like a domino effect.
It is.
So we've got rising costs,
Yeah.
income's not keeping up, and people feeling like they're not benefiting from the overall growth of the economy.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what's causing this?
Right. What are the root causes of all this?
Well, the source we looked at points to a few key things.
Okay, what are they?
One, like we talked about, is that incomes are growing way slower than the cost of living.
Right, that's a big one.
Two, changes in taxes have made it less appealing to save money.
Interesting.
And then there's the goods and services tax, or GST.
Yeah, the GST. It applies the same tax rate to everyone, regardless of income,
Exactly. And that can really hurt people with lower incomes.
because they end up spending a larger portion of their income on things that are taxed,
And finally, there's the rising cost of essential services.
like education, rent, healthcare, things you can't really avoid.
Right. And these have all gone up significantly, putting even more pressure on people's budgets.
It's a tough situation for sure.
What's really interesting is that the source points out that the middle class is earning money, but they're often not investing it well.
It's not just about how much you earn, it's about what you do with it, especially after you've covered all those necessary expenses.
Exactly. And on top of that, there's this issue of skills, or the lack of them.
Right. Having the right skills is more crucial now than ever before.
The source suggests that not having up-to-date skills can be a big problem for people trying to get better paying jobs.
Absolutely. The job market is constantly changing, and if your skills aren't keeping pace, it can be really tough to break free from income stagnation.
So we've talked about the problems. But the good news is that the source doesn't just leave us hanging. It also talks about potential solutions.
That's encouraging. What do they suggest?
Well, the person who shared their story talks about how they realized they needed a mindset shift.
Oh, that's an interesting concept. Tell me more.
So they were making more money than their parents ever did, but they were still stressed about money.
It's not always a direct correlation.
And it made them realize that just earning more wasn't enough. They had to change how they thought about and managed their money.
That's a valuable insight for everyone, really. It's not always about external factors. Our internal financial framework plays a huge role.
Exactly. And they break this mindset shift down into three parts. The first part is about moving away from what they call a victim mentality.
A victim mentality. How does that relate to personal finances?
It's about taking responsibility for your own financial situation. Instead of just blaming the economy or the government, it's about focusing on the things you can control.
Like your spending habits, your saving strategies, and your efforts to boost your income through things like upskilling.
Exactly. The second part is about breaking free from what they call a middle-class mindset.
Now, that's an interesting one. What exactly does that mean?
Well, they describe it as a mindset that's obsessed with saving money and always worried about financial security.
Okay, I can see that. While being careful with money is important, sometimes that mindset can become so limiting that it hinders growth.
Right. It stops people from taking chances or investing in things that could actually help them in the long run. It's about shifting from just trying to protect what you have to actively finding ways to grow your wealth.
It makes sense. So what's the third part of the mindset shift?
The third part is about adopting a startup mindset.
A startup mindset for your personal finances. What does that look like?
It's all about being willing to constantly learn, adapt, and grow. Just like a startup needs to be flexible and innovative to succeed, you need to be open to changing your financial strategies as things change around you.
I like that analogy. It's not about having a fixed skill set or income potential. It's about continuously learning, acquiring new skills, and adapting to navigate the financial landscape effectively.
Exactly. So let's sum up what we've learned from this deep dive. It's clear that achieving those classic markers of middle-class success, like owning a home, is getting harder and harder, even though people are earning more.
Yes, and the data really highlights that, showing us how inflation is outpacing income growth and how essential costs keep rising.
But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The source reminds us that we have the power to change our mindset.
Right. Moving away from that blame game, questioning those overly cautious financial habits, and embracing that growth-oriented, adaptable startup mentality.
And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for all of you listening.
Okay, I'm listening. What is it?
Considering everything we've talked about, the economic pressures, the power of changing your mindset, what are the biggest changes you need to make in your own financial life to not just survive, but to really thrive?
That's a powerful question. It challenges all of us to take a hard look at our financial perspectives and see how we can apply those principles of adaptability and continuous improvement to our own unique situations.
That's exactly what we want you to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore more important information that matters to you.
See you then.
Bye for now.